My name is Eliza Vale, 34 years old. Birthdays in my family are choreographed performances disguised as affection. Polite laughter for applause, perfect lighting for validation, and always my sister Tiffany in the center of it. That Saturday night was supposed to be my mother's celebration, but I didn't realize it would also be the night my patients retired quietly in the dark. I'd been on a 12-hour shift at St. Luke's Hospital, the kind that leaves your bones humming from fluorescent light and adrenaline. I told myself I'd at least make it to the dinner on time this year. They'd promised to pick up my daughter, Mia, and bring her along. "Don't worry," Tiffany had said last night, breezy as perfume. "We'll get her ready, grab the gift, just show up and look alive." It sounded generous. I'd actually thanked her. When one of my patients was discharged early, my supervisor looked up from her chart and smiled. "Go home, Eliza. You've earned an early exit." For once, I didn't argue. I drove across town, traffic thick as syrup, imagining Mia laughing with her cousins, my parents beaming under crystal light. Maybe tonight we'd pretend to be normal. The restaurant gleamed like a glass jewel box, white tablecloths, chandeliers throwing sequins of light across wine glasses. The hostess led me through a hum of voices and clinking silver. There they were at the long table near the window, my parents, Tiffany, radiant in sequins, her husband Eric scrolling his phone, their kids, Brianna and Jacob, demolishing dessert. But no Mia. I smiled automatically, scanning for her. "Where's Mia? Did she go to the restroom?" Silence. Tight, polished, performative. Then Brianna smirked. "She's volunteering." I blinked. "She's what?" Dad raised his wine glass like he was making a toast. "Your sister thought it would be good for Mia to help at the shelter today. Teach her perspective." My pulse tripped. "You took her to a shelter? Alone?" Tiffany's smile didn't shift. "Relax, Eliza. She's perfectly safe. I volunteer there all the time. It's called giving back. You could try it sometime." "She's 12. She's almost 13, she corrected smoothly. "Don't be dramatic. She's been acting out lately. I thought it might help." Mom chimed in, voice sweet and thin. "Tiffany's just helping. You're always so busy, dear." I reached for my phone. "Where is she exactly?" Tiffany sighed like I was exhausting. "And you don't have to." I dialed Mia's number. A ringtone chirped from inside Tiffany's purse. She fished out the phone and handed it over. She doesn't need to be glued to that all day. Something went very still inside me. The kind of still that comes right before a code blue. "You left my daughter with strangers and took her phone?" Eric chuckled. "Technically, they're not strangers. They know Tiffany." My chair scraped loud against marble. "Excuse me." "Eliza," Mom said quietly, warning in her tone. "Please don't cause a scene." "Too late," I said. "Scene caused." I walked out before anyone could stop me. Outside, the heat hit like punishment. My hands shook on the wheel. Red lights blurred into after images. Every minute felt stolen from Mia's safety. The shelter sat near downtown, a faded brick building with a sign that read, Family Resource Center. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed over the scent of detergent and crayons. A woman at the desk looked up, startled. "My daughter was dropped off here, Mia Vale." Someone said she was volunteering. Her eyes widened. "You're her mother? Thank God. She's been waiting for hours." She led me down a narrow hall, where a toddler cried somewhere behind a curtain. Mia sat on a cot, backpack hugged to her chest, trying not to cry. When she saw me, she exhaled so hard it sounded like release. "You came," she whispered. "I'll always come," I said, holding her close. She pulled back enough to meet my eyes. "Aunt Tiffany said I had to learn how lucky I am. She said if I like boys at 12, I'll end up here." It took a second to absorb that. "Like boys?" She nodded, cheeks red. "There's this boy from school, Tyler. Brianna likes him too. I said I think he's nice, that's all." My stomach nodded. "You did nothing wrong." Her lip trembled. "I was scared. I thought maybe you didn't want me." I kissed her forehead. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Let's go home." We signed papers, thanked the staff. The evening sky outside was violet smoke. She gripped my hand all the way to the car. Halfway home, she whispered, "Mom, did I do something bad?" "No, honey, you were honest. Some people just can't handle honesty." She looked out the window, silent. I wanted to promise everything would be fine, but families like ours don't trade in truth. They trade in appearances. At home, Mia went straight to her room. I stood in the hallway with her phone still in my hand, Tiffany's perfume lingering on the case. My reflection in the black screen looked like someone I didn't know. Tired, yes, but certain. I didn't shout, I didn't even cry. I just knew what came next. Sleep never came either. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her small figure on that cot, waiting for someone who should never have left her there. By 2 a.m., I stopped pretending. I made tea I didn't drink and watched dawn bleed gray across the window. You tell yourself these moments are one-offs, that families lose their minds for a day and then patch things up. But I'd been patching for decades. Tiffany was born when I was 4, the golden child wrapped in pink. The attention shifted instantly, spotlight to nightlight. Even as kids, she glowed and I organized. She performed. I kept the stage from collapsing. Mom used to say, "Eliza, you're so reliable." It sounded like praise until I realized reliable meant invisible. Tiffany grew into charm weaponized. Laughter timed to forgiveness, tears rehearsed to cues. She could spill juice and somehow make it my fault for handing her the wrong cup. I went the opposite way. Nursing school, stable income, a life built on function, not applause. Different planets, same orbit. When our grandmother died, her will shocked everyone. She skipped our parents entirely and left the old family house to Tiffany and me, half each. No one said it aloud, but we all knew why. Grandma had seen the pattern, the endless indulgence, the imbalance dressed as love. At first, it didn't change much. Tiffany stayed in the house with Mom and Dad, later moving her husband and kids in. I moved closer to the hospital. They still called it the family home. I called it the house I paid for without living in. Through the years, Tiffany's ventures, photography, wellness blogs, boutique candles, bled cash. Just until Friday, she'd say, batting lashes that could bankrupt angels. 100 here, 500 there. Every time, Mom smoothed it over. "You're so good with money, Eliza. Help her, keep the peace." Eventually, peace became expensive. The day she asked for $20,000 to launch another dream, I said, "If I help again, it's official. I'm not your bank. We'll make a loan, secured by your half of the house." She hesitated, then agreed. I had the papers notarized. She promised to repay in a year. She never did. Still, I let it go. I told myself peace was worth more than principle. But sitting in the dark beside Mia's closed door, I knew that lie had expired. The laughter at dinner, the empty chair where my daughter should have been, none of it was random. It was tradition. They didn't just abandon her, they rehearsed it. I opened my desk drawer. Inside lay a thin folder of receipts and signatures, the quiet archaeology of years spent paying for their comfort. I ran my finger over the edge, feeling the weight of silence turning solid. Every debt leaves a record, and I was done being the ledger everyone forgot they owed. Morning made everything look cleaner than it was. Steam rose from my mug like a prayer that didn't know who to ask. Mia padded in with her blanket draped like a cape and leaned her chin on the counter. "Are we still going to Grandma's later for cake leftovers?" she asked, hope testing the air. "Not today," I said gently. "Let's take a beat." She nodded, old soul acceptance in a 12-year-old frame, and busied herself with cereal. I watched her, cataloging the small ways she steadied herself. 2 deep breaths before opening the fridge, the way she folded the cereal box top twice so it stayed shut. Children learn what houses teach them. Ours had been teaching us to put lids on chaos. After I dropped her at a friend's for a group project, I came home to the folder. Receipts, bank transfers, the notarized agreement. I laid everything out on the kitchen table where I once taught Mia long division. There was a strange comfort in columns that aligned and signatures that didn't wobble. Love without boundaries, curdles into debt. Paper kept the boundaries steady when memory went soft. I heard Tiffany's voice in my head, just until Friday row, from the year she tried to sell artisanal candles with crystals molded inside. She'd insisted they healed your aura. They mostly burned holes in tablecloths. Then the wellness blog that was supposed to partner with resorts. It partnered with late fees, a photography course, a women in leadership retreat that turned out to be a brunch in a rented co-working space where the AC died by noon. Every time, Mom called it growth. I called it gravity. The 20,000 ask had been the turning point. She pitched it with a smile and a Pinterest board. "Imagine it," she'd said, glittering. "A web series that shows women how to live authentically." "How does authenticity pay back a loan?" I'd asked. "Don't be literal, Eliza. That's why you're unhappy. You live in straight lines." "Straight lines get bridges built," I said. "Curves are for rivers and charisma." Even then, she'd laughed like I was adorable. When I said we'd do a formal loan, secured by her half of the house, she'd blinked, offended. Then, when she realized I was serious, performed relief. At my kitchen table, she signed with a dramatic flourish, as if her pen stroke could bend numbers to her story. I took the paperwork to a notary after my shift. She promised a year. The year molted into 2, then 3. Her ventures changed names like outfits. The balance did not move. I thought of Grandma, of how the will had leapt over her own children and landed in our hands. At the time, Dad called it cruel. Mom called it a mistake brought on by grief. Tiffany called it proof she was the chosen one. She had lived in the house, after all, and houses belong to the ones who give them life. Grandma never explained herself, but in the back of a dusty keepsake box, sandwiched between a stack of recipe cards and a Polaroid of me and Tiffany in matching Easter dresses, sat a small cream envelope I'd never opened. On the flap, in her careful hand, a line: "When love forgets fairness, keep the house honest." I turned the envelope over in my fingers and set it aside. Not today. Today was for ledgers. I called a lawyer whose reviews said things like calm voice, sharp teeth. He flipped through the folder with the same concentration I used in triage. "You never intended to enforce this," he said without looking up. "It was supposed to be symbolic," I admitted. "A line in the sand that looked like a hug." He nodded once. "It's enforceable. Signed, dated, notarized, secured. You can recover the debt or the collateral." "Recover the property," I repeated, like I was practicing a new language. It sounded cleaner than take the house, less like a wrecking ball, more like a math problem with one answer. He outlined the process with a pen tapping lightly on the table, a 30-day demand letter, then a notice of default, then foreclosure if she didn't pay. "Do you want to proceed?" I thought of Mia alone on a narrow cot in a room that smelled like bleach and fear. Yes. He drafted the letter. It arrived in my mailbox like a small, heavy verdict. I read it twice, slid it into a manila envelope, and addressed it to the house. There was a brief, theatrical moment in which I considered tearing it in half, the way people do in movies when their courage goes soft. Then I remembered Brianna's smirk and Tiffany's calm voice calling terror a lesson. I sealed the envelope and mailed it. 2 days later, Tiffany called so fast the ring cut itself short. She didn't bother with hello. "Are you out of your mind? You're suing me?" "Not yet," I said. "The letter gives you 30 days. "Over what? A gift? Oh, this is about Mia, isn't it? You're punishing us because she's hormonal and you can't handle it." "I'm holding you accountable," I said. "She's 12, Tiff. Not a cautionary tale for your content." Her breath hissed. "You always think you're better, because you can add columns. You're not. You're small." "Maybe," I said, "but small things fit through keyholes." In the background, Mom's voice floated in. "Eliza, be reasonable. We're a family." Dad tried logic. "You'll tear us apart." "I didn't put the first tear in this fabric," I said. "I'm just refusing to stitch it for free." She hung up on a noise that sounded like a swallowed scream. That night I spread old photos on the table. Mia in her school uniform, Tiffany at her wedding, my parents smiling on the porch with sun in their hair. I should have felt nostalgic. Instead, I felt accurate. The pictures told a story where I stood off to the side, holding someone else's bag. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a screenshot Mia sent from upstairs. "Mom," she typed, "you need to see this." It was Brianna's post from the birthday night. Her arm hooked around Tyler's, their matching bracelets close up. The caption: "Best birthday ever." A heart emoji. A champagne emoji. The comments were a chorus line of couple goals, and so cute. My jaw set. Not morality then, not protection. Jealousy with a sermon voice. Tiffany's lesson wasn't about virtue, it was about stage time. I printed the photo and slid it on top of the folder like a paperweight. Not evidence for a courtroom, evidence for my spine. At noon, Tiffany went live from her car with damp eyelashes and tremors calibrated to sympathy. "My own sister," she began, voice throbbing, "is trying to steal our family home. She forged documents, twisted my kindness." The thumbnail read, "My sister's betrayal in dramatic red. Classic Tiffany, tragedy with a filter and a ring light." The comments bloomed like algae. Some people called me a monster. Others asked for receipts. Mom posted a status that said, "Family is forever," with a wreath emoji. Dad liked it. An acquaintance from years ago chimed in about how I'd always been intense. My phone felt hot in my hand. like it had caught a fever. "Do you want me to report it?" Mia asked, hovering at the kitchen doorway. "No," I said. "Let them talk. Words are cheaper than rent." Still, something in me wanted a ledger in the public square. I typed 3 sentences and hit post. Since this was made public, my 12-year-old daughter was left at a shelter by her own family. I have every transfer, every signature, every notarized page. Truth doesn't need theatrics. Then I put the phone face down and did the dishes because hot water and motion sometimes help when nothing else does. By morning, the comments had learned new steps. People remembered Tiffany's mystery charity retreat and the time she took deposits, then pivoted the event. Screenshots surfaced of refund requests and replies that sounded like sponsored Zen. The tide never flips all at once. It leans. And now it leaned. In the middle of the swirl, Eric texted me. Just a period then. I told her to apologize. No defense. No solidarity. A quiet line drawing from a man whose smile lived at the corners of rooms. I remembered the way he'd looked past me at the restaurant, calculating what aligned with his image. Eric would not go down with a ship. He'd swim to the nearest brand. A storm rolled in that evening, the kind that darkens windows at 4 p.m. I stood by the counter and finally lifted the cream envelope. The paper felt fragile but deliberate. I wanted to open it, to hear Grandma's voice without guessing. Instead, I slid my thumb under the flap and paused. Not yet. Not out of fear, out of sequence. I wanted my choice to be mine, not borrowed courage from a dead woman I loved. So I tucked the envelope into the folder's pocket and called my lawyer. "Send the follow-up," I said. "We proceed." He didn't ask why. Maybe he heard the steadiness in my voice. Maybe he recognized the sound of a woman who understands that calm is not surrender, it's decision. The next days came like a metronome. Certified mail receipts, red notices, a polite letter from Tiffany's self-styled manager demanding I cease defaming her brand. My lawyer replied with one line, "Please find attached the notarized contract." Every time the phone buzzed, I thought of Mia's small hand in mine at the shelter. A boundary is love with a spine. Around midnight on the 4th day, Mia shuffled into the living room with her blanket, hair a soft halo of sleep. "Can I sit with you?" she asked. "Always." She curled under my arm and watched the rain slide down the glass like lines on paper. "Will everything be okay?" She didn't mean legally. She meant us. "Yes," I said. "It might not be pretty for a while, but it will be true." She nodded, satisfied, and fell asleep with her cheek on my shoulder. When she breathed in, I felt something loosen at the base of my skull that had been tight for years. The doorbell rang 3 nights later, just as thunder shoved the sky. Through the distorted pain, I saw Tiffany's face pale as a confession, my parents behind her like punctuation. I didn't open the door yet. I looked at the folder on the table, at the cream envelope peeking out, at the photo of teenagers with bracelets and no shame. Rain hissed on the porch light. I opened the door and stood back, not inviting, not blocking, a human conditional. Tiffany's mascara held, barely. "We need to talk," she said, and for the first time, her voice had no glitter. It sounded like a person's. "Then talk," I said, and stepped aside enough for truth to fit through the keyhole. They shuffled into the living room like a family walking into a courtroom that used to be theirs. Rainwater dripped from their coats, pooling near the rug I bought with my first tax refund. Mom clutched her purse to her chest. Dad hovered by the window. Tiffany stood in the center, her sequined composure washed dull by the storm. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The sound of rain filled the silence like a held breath. Mom started first, voice trembling but sweet as ever. "Eliza, honey, can't we talk without lawyers and letters? We're family." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "We've been talking for years, Mom. I just finally put it in writing." Dad sighed, the weary kind that wants to smooth things down instead of clean them up. "You've made your point. Everyone's upset. You can still stop this before it goes too far." "Too far?" I said quietly. "Leaving a 12-year-old at a shelter wasn't too far?" Tiffany winced. She was fine. It was supposed to teach her perspective. "She learned something," I said. "Just not the lesson you intended." She looked away, mascara streaking. "You're twisting everything. You always think you're the moral compass." "Someone has to be," I said. The room went still again. Then Mom took a breath like she was about to cross a thin bridge. "There's something you don't know," she whispered. "I didn't want to tell you, but Tiffany's business, one of them, went under 2 years ago. We used part of our retirement savings to cover it. She promised she'd pay it back. We didn't want to worry you." I stared at her, the floor tilting under the weight of that confession. "You what?" "She was going to lose the house," Mom said, wringing her hands. "Your father and I thought it was temporary, just until she got back on her feet." Dad cleared his throat, guilt scratching his voice raw. "I co-signed a small loan for her, too. I thought it would stabilize things." Tiffany shot them both a look of disbelief and betrayal. "You promised not to tell her." "Secrets are expensive," I said. "Looks like we've all paid." Tiffany took a step forward, the tremble in her jaw finally showing through the practiced calm. "You think taking the house will make you even? It'll ruin them. They'll have nowhere to go." "They already chose their loyalty," I said softly, "and I'm done financing it." Mom's voice broke. "Eliza, please, we're not perfect, but can't you forgive us? We just want peace." "Peace doesn't mean pretending," I said. "It means truth. And the truth is, you protected her mistakes and called it love." Dad tried one more time. "We all made bad decisions." "Yes," I said, "some of us just signed ours." Lightning flashed through the window, and for a moment, all their faces looked ghost-like, versions of who they could have been if honesty had arrived sooner. Mom began to cry. Tiffany looked away. Dad muttered something about calling his lawyer. I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. When they finally turned to leave, the rain swallowed their shapes beyond the glass. I stood there long after the door shut, listening to the storm applaud the ending. Mia's voice came softly from the stairs. "Was that them?" "Yeah," I said. "Did they say sorry?" "Not really." She nodded, unsurprised. "Can we have hot chocolate?" I smiled faintly. "Good idea." We sat on the couch, mugs steaming between us. The house smelled like rain and cocoa, an odd mix of aftermath and warmth. She leaned against me, whispering, "I'm glad we have our own home." Her words stuck in my chest like an anchor of quiet clarity. Our home, not theirs, ours. Later, when she went to bed, I walked to my desk and pulled out the cream envelope. Grandma's handwriting looked calm, deliberate, the kind that doesn't tremble even at the end of a sentence. "When love forgets fairness, keep the house honest." I opened it. Inside was a folded letter, yellowed at the edges. The first line stopped my breath. "If you're reading this, it means the house has turned into a stage again." Her words flowed like she'd been watching the future. She wrote about raising my mother and watching how charm always won the room while steadiness cleaned up afterward. "I left the house to both of you so one could shine and one could steady. But if the shining starts to blind the rest, take the house. Keep it for the ones who still see clearly." At the bottom was a sentence underlined twice. "A home is a promise, not a performance." I folded the letter and sat back. The rain softened against the roof, as if listening. The next day brought escalation. Tiffany posted another video, this one angrier, sharper. "She's destroying everything. My sister wants revenge because her kid embarrassed me," she cried, tilting the camera for maximum tear sparkle. The comments multiplied. Some people sympathized. Others dug up screenshots of her old projects, her unpaid investors, the pattern. Eric finally broke his silence with a statement on his own page. "I support accountability. Family should mean honesty. Short, cold, and perfectly brand safe." That night, Mom texted a photo of the living room, half-packed boxes stacked against the wall. "We're trying to give her space," she wrote. "Please reconsider." I didn't reply. Instead, I drove through the storm and parked across from the house that used to be ours. The lights glowed through the curtains. Laughter leaked faintly through the glass. From a distance, it looked like peace. I could have stopped there, could have let the scene end like every other chapter, with me watching through the window, forgiving for free. But something inside me had rewired. They thought quiet meant weak, but quiet is what thunder sounds like before it decides to break. I drove home, headlights slicing through the rain, the lawyer's number already on my screen. "Proceed," I said when he answered. My voice didn't shake. "Understood," he replied. The legal wheels turned faster than I expected. Certified mail, public notice, deadlines ticking like a slow metronome of justice. Each paper that arrived felt less like vengeance and more like oxygen. Mia watched me seal an envelope one night and asked, "Does doing the right thing always hurt?" "Sometimes," I said, "but not as much as doing nothing." She nodded, quiet, and went back to her homework. The way she carried calm reminded me of Grandma, solid, unbothered by applause. Weeks blurred into a countdown. Tiffany posted fewer videos. Her audience thinned. Eric stopped appearing entirely. I kept waiting for guilt to crash through me like a wave. It never came, only small, measured ripples of relief. Then, one afternoon, the final notice arrived. 30 days passed. No payment, no appeal. The title would transfer. I went to the window. The rain had stopped. For the first time in months, sunlight touched the driveway like a verdict. Still, even with victory inked on paper, I knew the story wasn't over. Justice may close a case, but it never closes the echo. And somewhere beneath the quiet, a part of me still wondered, when the spotlight finally dies, what happens to the stage? The courthouse smelled of cold air and nerves. It was the kind of morning that felt rehearsed by fate. Gray light, polished floors, the shuffle of heels echoing like metronomes of consequence. I sat at the petitioner's table, hands folded on a folder that had once lived quietly in my drawer. Across the aisle, Tiffany was a portrait of precision. Immaculate makeup, pale pink blazer, expression rehearsed for pity. Mom sat behind her, clutching tissues. Dad kept his eyes on the floor. Mia wasn't there. I told her school came first. Justice should never be a spectacle for children. When the judge entered, Tiffany straightened, as if auditioning. My lawyer spoke first, methodical, factual, unflinching. He laid out every transfer, every notarized signature, every just until Friday that had hardened into debt. He spoke like a metronome of truth. Tiffany's lawyer countered that the money was a gift between sisters, offered with no expectation of repayment. The judge lifted one eyebrow. A gift secured by a notarized contract? She asked. The silence that followed had weight. When it was over, the verdict came as quietly as a closing door. Judgment for the plaintiff, full transfer of property rights. For a moment, I didn't move. I stared at the papers on the desk, the same pages that had once felt like betrayal to even consider using, and realized something strange. I didn't feel triumph. I felt stillness, like turning off a machine that had been humming for years. Mom began to cry softly. Dad put a hand on her shoulder, but didn't look at me. Tiffany sat frozen, mascara flawless again, but the performance had nowhere left to play. Outside, the sky was the same pewter gray it had been the day everything started. My lawyer handed me the certified deed. "It's yours now," he said. "It was always supposed to be ours," I murmured, not sure who I was talking to. When I drove to the house later that afternoon, the driveway was empty. A for sale sign leaned forgotten against the porch. The curtains were gone. The windows reflected only sky. Inside, the air smelled like lemon cleaner and old memories. I walked room to room, each step echoing a different decade. The hallway where Tiffany and I had played fashion show with Mom's scarves. The kitchen where Grandma once baked bread on Saturday mornings, singing hymns softly enough to sound like breathing. The living room where my parents used to praise Tiffany's dance recitals and forget to ask how my exams went. It was all quiet now. On the counter sat a single picture frame they'd left behind. Our family at Tiffany's wedding, frozen in perfect lighting. I stared at it, then set it face down. Some things don't deserve display. I whispered to the empty room, paid in full. For a moment, I thought I heard Grandma's voice in the creak of the floorboards, gentle, approving, or maybe just memory settling its own debts. I stood at the window and watched rain threaten again at the horizon. Funny how the storms always came back. Only this time, I wasn't afraid of getting wet. A year passed quietly. Mom and Dad downsized to a small one-bedroom near the freeway. They told relatives it was temporary. It never is. I heard from a cousin that Dad spends mornings walking laps at the local park while Mom sells handmade candles online. Ironically, the one venture Tiffany never managed to finish. Tiffany's unraveling came fast. Eric left within months of the ruling. His press statement, brief. Mutual separation. Focus on co-parenting. Her channel dwindled to under 100 views per video, then silence. One day, a neighbor texted me that she'd seen Tiffany volunteering at the same shelter, the one where Mia had waited for hours that night. She didn't post about it. No camera crew, just her, sorting donated clothes. I didn't know what to feel. Not victory, not pity, maybe balance. Mia's laughter brought the world back into focus. She turned 13 that spring. Confident, witty, fearless. Her favorite subject became debate. When I asked why, she grinned. Because truth deserves good lighting. She and Tyler were inseparable. The same boy who had sparked jealousy in an adult's heart now carried her backpack between classes. Once, when I teased her about it, she rolled her eyes. "Relax, Mom. We're just friends. Mostly." Apparently, he'd found out what happened through Brianna, who'd started to question her mother's version of events. The next week, an envelope arrived, small, shy handwriting. Inside, a note. Dear Aunt Eliza, I'm sorry about what happened. Mom said things that weren't true. I hope Mia's okay. She's really brave. Love, Brianna. I placed the letter in Grandma's envelope, alongside the old will. History had finally sent an apology, even if it came through the next generation. That summer, I turned the house into something new. Not a monument to victory, but a space with purpose. The living room became a small reading lounge for kids from the shelter, rows of donated books, soft chairs, a jar labeled the Honest House Fund. On the wall hung Grandma's underlined words, framed in simple oak: a home is a promise, not a performance. Sometimes, on quiet afternoons, I'd see Mia helping a younger kid sound out words, while sunlight spilled through the same windows where Tiffany once filmed her influencer vlogs. The contrast made me smile. Same house, different legacy. People often ask if I've forgiven them. I don't have an easy answer. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a door you walk through. It's a window you open slowly so the air can change. I keep the window cracked. That's enough. Every once in a while, Mom sends postcards, pictures of sunsets, verses about family. I don't reply, but I pin them to a corkboard by my desk, proof that maybe she's trying, in her own way, to remember what love looks like when it doesn't play favorites. As for Tiffany, I haven't seen her in months. Someone said she's studying social work now, helping women restart their lives after financial abuse. The irony isn't lost on me, but maybe redemption never asked permission to be awkward. I don't check her channel anymore. I don't need to. At night, when the house quiets, I still hear echoes. Mia's laughter upstairs, Grandma's voice in the pipes, even Tiffany's ghost laughter from the past when we were just sisters sharing secrets. But now the echoes sound softer, like they belong to walls that finally learned what silence is for. One evening, as Mia packed for her school trip, she asked, "Do you ever miss them?" I thought for a moment. Sometimes, I admitted. But missing doesn't mean inviting. It just means remembering what mattered before it broke. She nodded, satisfied. Grandma would be proud of you. I hope so, I said. She smiled. She would. You kept the house honest. When she left the room, I walked to the window. The sunset spilled gold across the floorboards. I thought about debts, financial, emotional, generational, about the long chain of women in our family who learned to hold a stage steady for someone else's spotlight. And I realized the quiet truth that had taken me decades to earn. The only way to break the pattern is to stop performing. Outside, the first stars blinked awake. I whispered a thank you to Grandma, to the storm, even to Tiffany, for teaching me that love without fairness is just theater. Then I turned off the lights, the house breathing soft and honest around me.